What do you think of when you consider the greatest rivalries in sports? Well, in the history of high school football in Alabama, the greatest rivalry centers in Clay County as two schools and two towns squared off for more than 100 times for the ultimate in bragging rights. It all began on October 20th, 1922, as the Lineville Aggies traveled to Ashland to face the Panthers in their first meeting on a football field, and the Clay Bowl was born. For those who ever coached, played, or witnessed any of the 101 meetings at the Clay Bowl, it can only be described in one way.
Crazy.
Would be intense.
Excitement.
Intensity. Awesome.
Intense.
Go Aggies.
Intense.
That's the ball game, and Central Clay County has won. Unbelievable finish. You said we hadn't seen it all, or we had? Yes, we have now.
We have seen it all.
It was a good relationship. It just hate to lose to Lineville.
If you didn't beat Ashland, you didn't win a game at you. You had to beat Ashland. That's all that mattered. You had to win the Clay Bowl.
I mean, it was exciting. It really was. It was one game, the one game of the year that you hope to win.
The memories of the Clay Bowl still dominate football conversations in Clay County. After 101 gridiron battles, the names and the games will never be forgotten.
Our most exciting player and the fastest was Hart Matters. But Hart ran 99 yards for a touchdown. And the fans went wild, and Hart was a rabbit.
Bob Burns was probably one of the best running backs that ever came out of Lineville, and he went on to Auburn to be a great athlete. And I remember him because I was so young, and I was beginning to travel with a team, and I could just watch him and how many people it took to tackle him. And of course, those were back in the older days when you played both ways. You played the whole ball game, and you played till you couldn't stand up, and they drug somebody else in. It wasn't the case of I'm a little tired, let me get a little rest. You didn't have that back in those days.
Harold Harris played at Lineville. He finished the year before I did, and he played at Auburn. And then he came back, and one time was a coach at Ashland and had an outstanding record. Yeah, I remember that. That's just like it coming home.
Ashland-Lineville game was played on Thanksgiving, and that meant company, that meant family, that meant more Ashland-Lineville playing football than it did Thanksgiving at that particular time.
All you could think of that day was kickoff. That's all you could think about. And you got ready for it. And the coaches did a good job of keeping us under control to a certain degree. You know, we were forbidden to go to Ashland. And of course, when you're young, you probably don't think as much about it as you get older. But it's a big deal.
My dad drove a school bus and carried the team to all the off games. And I got to go along as a little 6, 7, 8-year-old. I get to go back to the elementary school, and I get to be the star of telling them all about the football team that Friday night. So that began my interest in football, in Lineville football, and I saw it grow up. And
being in the yard, playing ball by myself, and just imagining that I'm playing in that game, you couldn't wait until you got the age to be able to play in that game. And and like I said, as a kid, you're just dreaming of all the things that you're going to possibly do in that game. But of course, when you get there, it's a lot different than when you were a kid.
The 1968 game, that's when Alan Smith and Tim Bush were a couple of the stars for Clay County, and they had a remarkable team. They went undefeated, and that was in the early stages of the playoffs when teams were selected to participate, and they completed a regular season against a good Lineville team. I think Lineville was 7-2. Clay County won that game, and that was the first one that had a playoff connection.
When my oldest son played, we had him 7-6, and Ashland was marching right on down. It was marching right on down. And I can't think who the quarterback was, but he flipped a little pass out and Dale intercepted it. And that stopped it. That was 1976 season.
1997, And the thing I remember about that game, again, of course, Clay County carrying that incredible winning streak. Lineville, I believe that probably, as far as talent on a football field in a Clay Bowl, was the most that we did see. Garnering all-state honors, the things they accomplished, that was one that certainly stood out. We talked about the games, I think, and of course the championship game in '96, where the state of Alabama was witness to something unique in this 5-mile rivalry, and these two squads meeting, and people looked at it. Clay County, again, that was the third leg of their championship run. Lineville, a lot of those guys were just babies. You know, they were in the midst of a 4-year run. They would make it to the state a couple of times, and a lot of those guys were freshmen and sophomores.
It's funny how it was a harbinger of things to come, you know, playing for something that counted, and instead of just the Clay Bowl. So.
In December of 1996, the AHSAA Super 6 Championships made its way to historic Legion Field in Birmingham. The first game at the new venue only added to the legend of football in Clay County, as the Panthers and Aggies would meet with the entire state watching.
When you play in a state championship game, it's a pressure game regardless of who you play, and then it just, you know, it so happened to be Lineville, you know, and it's kind of odd. I guess the dividing line was between Ashland and Lineville, about north and south. We went south and they went north, and you know, I never would ever dream, because I knew they had a good team. I knew we had a pretty good team, but you know, for us to play again in the first ever away from the school's field, to play them, it was, you know, really unusual, to be honest about it. And you know, I don't think there's anything open in Clay County during that game, you know, because but they had a very good team, and we had a good team, and we was fortunate enough to win. But you know, that's just something that don't happen very often, where you two, one of the biggest rivalry games in the whole state, plays against each other in the state championship game.
Football is a way of life in Clay County, and some of the most passionate fans in the nation were always ready to come out in force to show their support.
You had to find walking room. I mean, even as a player coming out of the locker room, I mean, we had to squeeze through the fans, and that feeling was like no other feeling, because you know, when you going through that, it's everybody holler your name, and you squeezing through, and once you get on the field, you look up and it's only standing room, barely even standing room. It's just people just there, you know. You could hear the stadium all over the county. So just about everybody in the county was at that game, and people from other counties at that game, and it was wild.
People would come, and they would get there, believe it or not, they'd get there at like 4 o'clock in the morning and wait in line. I know that sounds crazy, but it honestly would happen. And when we played at Clay County, you know, there'd be people in line there, and you go through the school all day long. They'd just be sitting there in a little chair there, and that you take to the ball games, and you know, they'd just be sitting there in line waiting. And then, you know, when we'd go to Lineville, the same thing would happen, and it was just amazing how, because our stadiums wouldn't hold that much, and you know, the visitor side especially on both stadiums. So you had to get there early to get a seat.
The 4th round in the state playoffs. Coach Goodwin was coach then, and he brought us up there. The 4th round used to be during Thanksgiving holiday week, and we were out of school. So that week he brought us up there every morning at 8 o'clock. Let's do a walkthrough. The Aggie moms at the time would feed us breakfast just to get us out of bed and get us going. Well, that Friday in the state playoffs, you couldn't buy tickets before the game. It was at the gate. You had to buy the ticket. So 8 o'clock we get up there. At about 9:30 to 10, we're leaving. The line is already at least 100 people in line at 9:30 in the morning on a Friday morning. The game doesn't start till 7 o'clock that night. To see that right there was that was memorable to me.
There are rivalries throughout the state that have never reached Clay Bowl status. So what made this border war different from all the rest?
It was the entire community just comes together for that one event, and it's the entire county. Pretty much, Clay County or Ashland and Lineville coming together, supporting their schools, and it's really like both towns shut down for that night.
Just that 5 miles apart, like you want to beat them. They right there. Like you got to go to Lineville, eventually to the bank or something, or they got to come to Ashland to get something to eat or something. Like it's something you're gonna see them, so you want to make sure that you're able to hey, you remember what happened?
When they came into that game, they realized if things maybe hadn't gone as well during the season, it was a chance to redeem themselves in a certain way. I remember the two games where each one of the streaks ended and the joy that both of those teams had. They knew what had been transpiring the past few years, and they wanted to be the ones to end that streak. I think one of the games was an overtime game in Lineville in 1988, and then the 98 games where Lineville was able to end the streak, to see the joy. They all realized how much it meant to people in their communities.
There's so many people that grow up in Clay County and stay in Clay County. So you ended up working with these people on a daily basis and seeing them, and yeah, winning is important, and I think that's what made it so special.
You enjoyed the atmosphere and the game right there, but in a way, you was always glad when it was over with, because it was just a relief. And obviously, it's a lot better, if you won the game than if you lost. But even when you lost, you always was worried about going into the playoff game, because if you won, you're on a high and you got to get back down, and if you lost, you always felt like that. They think the season's over with now, and you still got playoffs, and you got to get them up. So it was that first round of playoffs always worried me as a coach.
It was different. We always say, people say, the pressure, people put pressure on you as a coach or as a player, but as a coach, I never really felt that was the case, because I put enough pressure on myself to want to win and be the best. But that game was a little different. You did feel like you were carrying the weight of your part of the county, and you wanted to win enough for them that it felt a little outside pressure. People would say they were definitely a lot friendlier to you after the game when you won than they were when you lost. Nobody ever got real ugly, but nobody go out of the way to speak to you in the grocery store when you got beat for a few days. But when AHSAA won that first state championship, there's no doubt that it propelled. We knew, that's we can't let them get too far ahead of us on that. And so there's no doubt that the success of both teams helped each other.
When we got good, Lineville was good too, and then we very seldom had a year where neither one of us was too bad. I mean, both teams were usually pretty good. I mean, we had a run there in the 90s where we was probably a little bit better than them, and then they had a run at the end of the 90s that they were probably a little bit better than us, and then in the 2000s we kind of swapped back and forth. So it's really amazing that a county and schools at this small was really that good. If you're good, everybody wants to know why, and then when they see it, it makes them work a little bit harder, and it just helps everybody to work a little bit harder to get better.
As Clay County schools began to show their age, the rumor of school consolidation began to circulate.
Heartbroken. You have. My dad was an Aggie, my brother was an Aggie, my mother was an Aggie, my sister was an Aggie, I was an Aggie, my whole family were Aggies. And when you say you're gonna close something like that, at first you're mad. Why? I mean, you got a great thing going here. Why close it down? And when you got to listening to more of what they said this new school was going to offer and all, you sort of had to believe that, hey, that's the best way for the kids of Clay County. So, but at first, I was heartbroken. I didn't want Lineville to go.
I was wrong, but for some reason I felt like it's going to ruin football. I couldn't fathom it being championship football again, and been used to that. And so, but I was completely wrong. I never heard one thing, and I was working the gates, still do, of the teams having any animosity against each other.
it was something, and I give Bob Riley credit for this, something above something I could comprehend, because I had been totally involved in the rivalry between the two. I'll never forget the day Bob Riley called me in his office as governor. He said, I got a task for you. And I said, okay, Governor, whatever I can do. He said, I want you to come up with a plan to consolidate the schools. And I thought for a minute, I said, Governor, in World War II, the Japanese emperor asked the people to get in their airplanes and fly out into the battleships, and they didn't have a way back. I said, you want me to be a kamikaze? You want me to end my political career with this? We put together a solid committee of citizens to look at not consolidation, but to look at the fact that how we could continue to move education forward in Clay County, knowing that if you went to Ashland and looked at those buildings, you didn't have the financial fix. If you go to Lionel and look at the elementary school and the old buildings that we had, you couldn't. And so they came back after an intense study. They got some outside help, and they looked and they said, financially, we can't support the two high schools we got. But in making that report, we had an architect to come with us and say, but if you consolidate, let me show you what you're going to get. He said, this is what you can have in Clay County. This is what your kids can enjoy in Clay County. And this is how you can greatly improve the aspect of education in Clay County. Well, we did that, and the board took this and said, here's where we are, here's what we need to do, but we don't have any money. So we went back to Governor Ryan and said, all right, here's your plan, where's the money? After we got through the animosity of not having two football teams, which really continued to linger out there until this year. That animosity continued to be out. Oh, you've ruined the greatest rivalry in America. You've ruined the chance for Alabama, for Lionel or Ashland to play in the state championship. You've just ruined athletics, and there are certain people in this county who athletics was more important than academics. And now we win the 5A state championship. Those people who were naysayers and sitting on the sideline and throwing rocks at us now are patting us on the back because we made a decision that paid off. And thank God Coach Horn came back and put that together, and that's where we are today. And as you see, the county is prospering more today than it ever has, and it has more business in the industry. We can't find enough people to work. All of that reverts back to, I'm not going to go and start a plant or start a business or invest in a county if it doesn't have a good education system. I don't care what else you got to give me. I'm not going to ask people to come to work for me in an area and live in an area where their kids are not going to get an adequate education. So with this education facility, and just the looks of the facility is a tremendous asset to us. I've had people come by and accuse us of having a junior college, and I said, well, that's okay with me, but it isn't.
On September 23rd, 2011, thousands of fans made their way to Horn-White Stadium in Ashland for what would be the 101st and final meeting between the two rivals. The date had been circled for months as both teams added another classic to the history of the Clay Bowl.
We come out to warm-ups to about 8,000 people probably, and probably filled in probably another 6,000, so I know I've never played nothing like that. I was a little nervous, pre-game jitters or whatever, but once the game got going and we kind of got a feel for the game, it was just a normal game at that point, and it was either win or lose.
I think even that night, the seed for the new school people were already accepting it and realized, this could be a good thing. And I give football every bit of the credit for that. But I think that spring training, we drove over there, and the kids practiced together, and I think they enjoyed it. And they carried that home and carried it back. The next day we was back in Lionel High School and Clay County High School. But I think them having a good experience, meeting the Lionel kids, playing with the Lionel kids, playing with the Ashland kids, I think that spring training really sealed the deal. Because, I think they took their good feelings, told mom and daddy and grandma, this ain't gonna be so bad. But I think that was a good start for Consolidation.
We were all volunteers, but at the same time, all we've ever known is Ashland Lionel. So it was tough, but once as the season kept going, I think we all just we really started gelling together. We were beating people first beginning of the season, but I think as the season kept going, we just kind of got tighter and tighter, and then it really became a volunteers thing. Ashland Lionel got put to the side. We was all about winning the state championship, making the school look good, making the county look good, the city, our whole family. So that's really what it was all about.
But when I came back, of course, I knew some of the kids, but most of them I didn't. But I couldn't see it that that they were from Ashland or they were from Lineville. You know, I just sensed that they was basically all one, and I think that's how it is today. You know.
In early 2018, Hall of Fame coach Danny Horn returned to Clay County to take over the volunteer program. After a 3-3 start, the Vols put together one of the most impressive runs in state history.
Minute, last second wins, but everybody on that team had to have that same mentality in order to fight till that fourth quarter was over. Just like we lost that game with like a couple of seconds with the field goal block. That game turned our whole season around. Because after that game, if it was 1 second on the clock, they was playing. No matter what the ball was, what was going on, they didn't hear no whistle or horn blow, they was playing. And that what the championship mentality in those kids, they found that that's what they had to do the rest of the season if they wanted to get what they wanted to.
I've been on a run to the state championship, never won one. Played for 3, never won one. So to actually be a part of something like that as a fan was very special. And to see that team actually go from where they started out at the first year watching Benjamin Russell, where they dominated them in the first half, to the second half was a different story, to the last game. That was an amazing run right there, to watch a team do that.
Well, it was tremendous.
Yeah.
And the way they did it was very unusual, going to their home fields and winning and get the team getting better through as the season progressed to the point that they won those games is really amazing.
Just them coming together and just finally getting that one championship, I think it means the world for not just for the program, but just for everybody that's from this county in general.
That was something big. It was very big, and it was big for the community because you got championship winning back in the county, which it was already here, but you just had to get a chemistry of the players and depending on each other. It came down to it that they bonded pretty much on their own. When the time came, they came together. They ran off a couple big wins, took us down to the championship. Things like that, that's what it takes to be a champion.
Hey, I felt like a little kid going to the Super 6 again. I was up in the stands, jumping up and down, watching these boys, like these young guys I've watched literally grow up from the time they were 5 or 6 years old and go out there and win a state championship. That's something you dream about as a little kid. My dream didn't get fulfilled, but hey, I felt like I was right there with them.
After the game, you know, of course it didn't hurt that my grandson kicked the winning point in the state championship game, but I knew all the kids. I had coached a lot of them kids in junior high ball. Even when I was the principal, I coached junior high football and basketball, and I knew a lot of kids, and so it felt, I felt a part of it, to be honest with you. That cemented, if there was ever any questions, I think that really sealed the deal as far as, I don't see how anybody can say they shouldn't have done it or it's not working, because it's been working from the get-go.
You sit there in the state championship game, look in the stands, and our side was just packed, and it was Ashland fans, it was Lineville fans, it was they were from Miller Valley, they were from Millville, and it's just the whole county was together as one, which it should be. And here you got to treasure what we did at Clay County, and they got to treasure what they did at Lineville, because it means something to it. But now we're one school now, so you got to all kind of pull together and help in one school. And I think last year what we was able to do kind of pulled us even a little bit closer.